You type out a message, read it once, maybe twice, hit send, and then something shifts inside your chest. Not panic exactly, more like a quiet alarm. So you open the chat again, reread what you just wrote, and suddenly the words look different. Too eager, too cold, too honest, too much. So you delete it, or unsend it, or replace it with something safer, something smaller. And for a second, there's relief. But underneath that relief, there's a question you've probably never said out loud. Why can't I just send a message like everyone else? People might call that anxious, overthinking, maybe even a little obsessive. But psychology tells a different story. What you're actually doing, that constant rereading, rewriting, unsending, it's not a malfunction. You're not broken. You're not unstable. You are someone whose brain processes communication with more layers than most people ever access. There's a voice inside your head that most people don't have turned up this loud. Psychologist Mark Snyder called it self-monitoring, the ability to observe your own behavior in real time and adjust based on social context. Everyone does this to some degree, but for some people, that internal monitor doesn't just observe, it edits, it revises, it second-guesses. And in the world of digital communication, where your words sit on a screen with no tone of voice, no facial expression, no context, that editor goes into overdrive. Think of it like this. Most people write a message the way someone tosses a ball. Casual, instinctive, gone the moment it leaves their hand. But you write a message the way an author writes a sentence in a novel. Every word carries weight. Every comma matters. And once it's out in the world, you can still see it. Sitting there, exposed, open to interpretation. That's not dysfunction. That's a heightened level of cognitive processing applied to communication. Your brain isn't glitching. It's doing quality control in an environment that offers you almost zero feedback until it's too late. And in a world full of careless words, yours are anything but. Here's something most people never think about: the gap between what you meant and what someone reads. In face-to-face conversation, your tone does the heavy lifting. Your eyebrows, your timing, the softness in your voice when you're joking versus when you're serious. But in a text message, all of that vanishes. Communication researchers call this the problem of media richness, the idea that certain channels carry more information than others. A face-to-face conversation is rich. A text message is thin. And if you're someone who communicates with nuance, with layers, with emotional precision, thin channels feel dangerous. Because you know what it's like to be misunderstood. You know how one sentence, read in the wrong tone, can shift everything. So you write carefully, and when the message doesn't carry the exact weight you intended, you pull it back, not because you're afraid of talking, but because you're afraid of being heard wrong. Imagine handing someone a letter, but they can only read every third word. That's what texting feels like for people who think in full emotional paragraphs. You're not paranoid. You're not reading too much into things. You're aware of a real limitation in the medium, and your brain is simply trying to compensate for it. For some people, this habit didn't start with a phone. It started much earlier, in a house where the wrong word got the wrong reaction, where saying something honest was met with silence or anger, or the kind of disappointment that taught you to rehearse before you speak. Attachment researchers describe this pattern in people who developed anxious attachment styles, often in environments where love felt conditional on performance. If you said the right thing, you were safe. If you said the wrong thing, you lost connection. And over time, that wiring doesn't just disappear when you grow up and start texting friends or partners. It migrates. It shows up in the way you hover over the send button, the way you reread a message 4 times from the other person's perspective, the way deleting a message feels less like editing and more like surviving. Take someone like Marin, 31, a graphic designer, who told a therapist she unsends at least 1 message a day, not because the messages are bad, but because, in her words, "I never trust that what I said is safe enough." That instinct, it was built somewhere. You're not weak for carrying it. You were trained, long before you had the language for it, to preempt rejection by erasing yourself first. Let's call this what it quietly is: perfectionism, but not the kind people brag about in job interviews. This is socially prescribed perfectionism, a concept studied extensively by psychologists Hewitt and Flett. It's the belief that others expect flawlessness from you. At anything less than the perfect message, the perfect tone, the perfect response, will be judged. And it's exhausting. Because the standard you're trying to meet isn't just high, it's invisible. You don't actually know what the other person wants to hear, so your brain fills the gap with worst-case scenarios. That sounded too needy. That was too blunt. They're going to think I'm weird. And so you delete, rewrite, soften, shorten. Sometimes, erase entirely. Not because the message was wrong, but because no version of it ever feels right enough. Here's the nuance, though. There's a difference between healthy self-awareness and a loop that keeps you from ever feeling safe in your own words. If the deleting happens once in a while, after a vulnerable message, after a risky joke, that's your brain doing its job. But if every message triggers the same spiral, if you find yourself exhausted by a simple text conversation, that might be worth sitting with, not to fix, just to notice. Because awareness, real, honest awareness, is always the beginning. Sometimes, you don't delete because the message was wrong. You delete because it was too right. You said something real, something honest, and the second it left your hands, the vulnerability hit like cold water. Researcher Brené Brown describes this as foreboding joy, the instinct to pull back from something genuine because your brain associates openness with danger. And in the context of messaging, it looks like this. You tell someone you miss them, and then immediately wish you hadn't. You share something personal, and then feel exposed, like you just handed someone a weapon. So you unsend, not because you didn't mean it, but because meaning it felt like too much. This is one of the most misunderstood parts of the delete habit. From the outside, it can look flaky or confusing, but from the inside, it's an act of emotional self-defense. You opened a door, felt the wind, and shut it before anyone could walk through. And here's what no one tells you. That impulse to protect yourself doesn't make you fake. It makes you someone who knows the weight of your own words. Someone who doesn't throw honesty around carelessly. That's not a flaw. That's emotional intelligence, operating under pressure. The only question is whether the walls you're building are keeping people out or keeping you locked in. So what do you do with all of this? You don't force yourself to stop deleting. That's not how any of this works. Psychologist Kristen Neff's research on self-compassion suggests that change doesn't start with discipline. It starts with understanding. Instead of punishing yourself for unsending, try noticing the moment right before you do it. What were you feeling? What were you afraid of? That pause, that small act of curiosity, is neuroplasticity in action. It's your brain learning a new response to an old trigger, and over time, it loosens the grip. Not all at once, not perfectly, but enough. Enough to let a message sit. Enough to trust you. Your words are allowed to take up space. Enough to send something real and breathe through the discomfort of being seen. You don't have to become someone who texts without thinking. That was never the goal. The goal is to stop punishing yourself for caring about how your words land, because that care is rare and it matters. You were never the problem in the conversation. The way your brain works, the rereading, the editing, the deleting. It was never a sign that something was wrong with you. It was a sign that your words mean something to you. And in a world that talks fast and listens slow, that's not a flaw. That's a depth most people never reach. If this helped you see yourself a little more clearly, leave a like. If you want more videos exploring the psychology of people like us, subscribe. You're not alone in this.